everyone, Lauren, that awkward plant girl. Welcome back to my channel. It's so good to see you guys. Thank you guys for popping in. Today we are going to be cleaning out one of my oldest terrariums. It's the second oldest terrarium I have in my collection. I haven't touched it since about 2 years ago or so. It has been left pretty much completely untouched. So terrariums are touted as a magical cure-all, like you can just shove plants in there and they'll just magically grow all over the place, like there doesn't need to be anything else done with them, and that is not the case. There are a lot of things that need to be done with them, and unfortunately a lot of beginners make these common mistakes when they're building the terrariums and when they're taking care of the terrariums. Terrariums, with their magical awesomeness, they still have limits and they still need to be maintained, upkept, and they're not a magical cure-all easy system for all of your plants to go into. It has to be built right and it has to be maintained properly. So let's start cleaning out this terrarium and go over the 5 common mistakes that most beginners make. The first mistake is very apparent. Just opening up this terrarium and peering through the top, you can see there is a lot of overgrowth. Overgrowth happens when you put plants in a terrarium that are too big for the terrarium space, that are not properly trimmed back on a regular basis, or plants that are invasive. So if they're overly invasive and they're going to take over everything and take over the entire space, and they will eradicate almost all the other species in the terrarium without proper control. So I made that mistake here. I put in a lot of ferns, and in my head at that time, most ferns are equal. I didn't realize that ferns could actually be invasive, but I should have known at the time, seeing as how ferns had survived the dinosaurs. There are definitely going to be invasive ferns. I also live in the Pacific Northwest, so I see ferns everywhere all the time. I just thought they were everywhere because they were a native species, but delving into this further, I learned that things like Boston ferns are actually an invasive species because they spread through spores and runners. They can go all over the place, and we're gonna find a lot of Boston ferns in here. I can tell just by what we have going on from the top. That is mistake number 1. It's a very common mistake. Even beginners make it. Even people who have been building terrariums for a while make it. You have to know the plants that are in your terrarium, and you have to prevent that overgrowth. Which brings us to mistake number 2, lack of light. A lot of beginners will either put their terrariums in a place where there is not enough light, thinking low light plants, low light terrariums. I actually have mine shoved directly under a grow light. That was not a problem. There should have been adequate light. Why was there not adequate light for these plants? Because of the overgrowth that we previously talked about. Unfortunately, when those plants took over the entire space, you will see underneath all of this dead and debris and just nastiness. And the reason that is there, all of these dying leaves, are caused because those plants were not getting enough light to maintain that foliage. So that is why you have to have really good light for your terrariums. It doesn't have to be super strong light. It just has to be the light that the terrarium plants need. And if they don't get the light that they need, then they're not going to be able to thrive. Unfortunately, there is a misconception out there that ferns are a low light plant. There are ferns that can handle low light. Most ferns are in locations where they actually get pretty decent light. Many of their species actually grow natively in the Pacific Northwest, and you'll see them along roadways and barely out from under trees. You'll see them surviving harsh winters, you'll see them surviving the snows, and you'll see them in bright, direct light. If they get too much light, then some of their foliage will start to burn a little bit, and you know to dial the light back. And that's the same thing in terrariums. If there's too much light, you'll notice some burning and bleaching on the foliage, which was the case with the very top plants you can see right here. When there is burning and bleaching on the foliage, this foliage cannot be repaired. We can only remove it because it's going to harbor a bunch of different issues, unfortunately, and it won't be able to provide the plant with any energy. So a lot of these are going to have to be cut back because they couldn't withstand what was happening because the terrarium wasn't maintained properly. We need to make sure that there's adequate light getting to all of the plants in the terrarium. Which brings us to mistake number 3, dying plants and debris. There has to be some sort of cleanup crew, or you have to be the cleanup crew in your terrarium. Otherwise, there's going to be all kinds of fungal issues, mold issues, just nastiness in general in your terrarium. You can see on a lot of these plants, especially on the thicker leaved ferns in this tank, like the staghorn fern here in the middle, you can see that there is a lot of fungal issues going on here. And this can be treated with a copper spray. I will show that to you. It's no biggie. It's very easily treated. It's just really hard to maintain that and to actually cure it and treat it if they're in a terrarium, because fungal and bacterial issues thrive in moisture. They will live in soil. They will live on other plants. They will live and grow and reproduce in various debris. So you either need to be the cleanup crew and properly maintain your terrarium, or you need to have some type of living cleanup crew in there. But there is a variety of different kinds of bug species that can be your cleanup crew. They are not nasty, they are not disgusting, they will not harm you. They will stay contained in their terrariums. They're not going to be escaping, especially if you have a fish tank terrarium sort of situation. These types of bugs are part of nature's ecosystem, and they are something that can be incorporated in our terrariums and should be incorporated in our terrariums if we are going to be keeping them for long term, and we are not going to accept responsibility of being the cleanup crew. Otherwise, we're going to have a very unhealthy terrarium. So either we've got to maintain it, or we've got to hire some little critters to maintain it. The next common mistake that happens is just putting things in the terrarium that look pretty, that look nice, that you would normally use on your plants outside of terrariums. Doesn't always work inside terrariums. For example, the little stake that you saw, I put 3 of those in there. They have all rotted away. I knew when I put them in that they were probably going to rot. I did not realize they would rot to that extent. I also put like a driftwood stick in the middle there that the staghorn fern was mounted to. It was meant to like rise the staghorn fern up and give it extra nutrients and stuff. Half of that is actually turned to dust and rotted away. So all of that is going to be contributing to the debris around, and if you don't have a cleanup crew to take care of that, then the fungal and mold issues can grow exponentially and cause a lot more issues. It's also going to make your terrarium look kind of bad, because the terrarium is not going to be able to maintain that look and style that you created initially. So you need to make sure that whatever you're putting in your terrarium is safe for your plants. So when you buy something from the store that looks like it's going to last a long time, make sure you wash it off and clean it off. You can use rubbing alcohol, some dish soap, and some water, and just really just scrub it and make sure that you kill everything that's on it, because humidity is king, and terrariums have a lot of humidity, and that's just going to breed a lot of everything. So you need to really pay attention to that when you are building your terrariums. So make sure that you're cleaning the materials, you're not introducing you nucky things, and make sure that they are terrarium friendly, and make sure that they are going to survive the lifetime of your terrarium, because if they don't survive the lifetime of your terrarium, then you will have to find things to replace them, and that's another maintenance thing that you're going to have to stay on top of. Clearly, about 2 years is the limit. Those broke a long time ago. They were actually being held up by the other plants just trying to survive in there. This was not an example of a thriving ecosystem. This was an example of plants overtaking one another, not a properly maintained ecosystem, and a lot of imbalance in this tank. The 5th and final mistake that terrarium beginners make is ventilation. A lot of people think they can just dump everything in a terrarium, close it up, call it good. This is not always the case. Not always the case at all. I've even said it like that is the case, but there are other steps in between. For example, after you first make a terrarium and you initially put the water in it, you want to keep opening it up a little bit and letting the excess water that you poured in there out. If you didn't pour excess water, that's okay, but you still want to go and open it and check it and make sure that the humidity is not too much, because a lot of times there will be an excess of humidity that can cause a lot of issues. Another thing that you have to do is when your terrariums are in areas of heat, or you have a heat wave, air conditioner goes out in your house, you put it in a new place with a lot of sun, and that causes a lot of heat buildup in there, you do want to be checking the temperatures in your terrariums, because you can essentially be cooking your plants, drying your plants out, and killing them in there. They will still die from the heat in there, depending on the type of plants that you have. Begonia especially are susceptible to high heat temperatures. A lot of begonia do not handle it very well. They prefer cooler temperatures. So it's definitely something to keep in mind, definitely something to watch their there are a lot of other touted terrarium plants that have some temperature issues, so you want to maintain the temperature. Part of maintaining that temperature is opening up, ventilating, and allowing the heat to escape. You can also get like a mini fan to go in your terrariums, especially if it's a bigger terrarium with a lot of plants. You want to have some airflow and some ventilation in there, and that'll prevent those fungal issues that we were talking about before. Another ventilation issue that is the opposite of that is actually not having it sealed up enough. I have had this happen to me as well. If you don't cut and angle things properly when you're putting on the lid, if there is gravel or little pieces of plant, it'll prop open the lid. Sometimes heat can cause the lid to warp. Sometimes seals on terrariums are not all sealed up. They can wear down over time too, like seals around jars and those sorts of things. Those things can break down over time, so you do want to keep an eye on that, and that will cause humidity to escape. If you DIY terrariums like I do, you have to be hyper aware of ways that the ventilation could compromise the humidity containment. Humidity is going to be escaping in a lot of different types of terrariums, and it's probably things that you haven't thought of before. So after you build a terrarium, it's a really good idea to keep an eye on your terrarium. Make sure that it doesn't dry out completely, because when your terrariums dry out, all of your new cuttings that you put in there will die. Anything that you're propagating will die. High humidity new growth will die. Humidity is incredibly important. Ventilation is just as important, because that's what contains and releases it. So you need to pay attention to that so that you can be aware of what's going on in your tank and make it the optimum level so that your plants can thrive in there. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!